Hello. Just after 2:17 a.m., the quiet Florida coastline broke beneath the wail of approaching sirens, their red and blue reflections trembling across the glass walls of Dorian King's beachfront mansion. Neighbors who rarely saw movement at this hour stepped onto balconies, drawn by instinct to the spectacle forming at the edge of the wealthy cul-de-sac. Inside the mansion, the silence felt unnatural, thick, lingering, as if the air itself refused to move. When Officer James Rooker pushed open the unlocked door, the first thing he noticed wasn't the blood on the marble floor, but the faint sound of someone breathing in short, terrified bursts. A young woman crouched near the grand staircase, her back pressed against the cold railing, fingers trembling against her lips. Mascara streaked down her cheeks, her eyes unfocused, pupils blown wide with shock. Rooker approached cautiously, calling out to her, but she didn't answer. She simply pointed toward the hallway leading deeper into the house. Every step echoed, bouncing sharply along the polished surfaces until he reached the doorway of the living room. There, sprawled across a white leather rug, lay the unmistakable figure of Dorian King, business icon, philanthropist, and one of the most recognizable Jamaican billionaires living in the United States. Rooker had seen death before, but this scene felt unsettlingly intimate. Blood had pooled beneath Dorian's torso, spreading in a dark, slick halo that reflected the flicker of the emergency lights now flooding through the windows. No forced entry, no shattered glass, no overturned furniture, nothing suggested a break-in. Instead, the room looked eerily preserved, like a moment frozen seconds after the violence occurred. Rooker radioed for backup and moved closer, noticing faint bruising along Dorian's jawline, as if someone had gripped him in his final moments. The wound itself was small, precise, deliberate. A professional, Rooker thought, or someone who desperately wanted this to look that way. Behind him, the girl, no more than her early 20s, slipped into the room, hugging her arms around herself as though holding her ribs together. "I didn't do anything," she whispered, voice barely audible. Rooker didn't press her yet. Her shock looked real, and her fear seemed rooted in something deeper than guilt. He asked her name, but she hesitated, glancing toward the front door as if expecting someone else to walk in at any second. Finally, she said, "Aaliyah." Nothing more, no last name, no explanation, only that tremor in her voice and the way her eyes kept darting toward the shadows behind Rooker. Outside, more patrol cars arrived, their engines rumbling low as officers fanned across the property. The mansion's exterior, with its towering palms and polished stone driveway, looked almost serene under the moonlight, too serene for the chaos unfolding inside. Rooker stepped onto the terrace to clear his thoughts, replaying every detail Aaliyah's body language had revealed. She hadn't cried, she hadn't moved toward Dorian's body, she hadn't even asked if he was alive. Instead, she kept scanning the darkness beyond the pool as though the real threat was still out there, watching. Rooker had learned to trust instincts and had screamed danger. He returned inside as detectives began sealing the scene, their quiet movements adding another layer to the mansion's suffocating stillness. Aaliyah sat on the edge of a velvet chair now, arms wrapped tightly around herself, staring at nothing. Rooker crouched beside her, lowering his voice. "Who else was here tonight?" She flinched. For a moment he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she murmured, "Someone came to the house, someone he knew." Her gaze drifted toward the long hallway, where shadows swallowed the far end of the mansion. Rooker followed the direction of her stare and felt an unexpected chill. Whoever she meant, they hadn't come through the front door. And as he prepared to question her further, he knew this was only the beginning of a long, unraveling nightmare. And the mansion held its secrets. Morning sunlight crept across the coastline, indifferent to the tragedy that had unfolded hours earlier. By the time detectives arrived, the mansion felt colder than before, its echoing halls still carrying the weight of Aaliyah's trembling confession. Detective Serena Holt moved through the foyer with slow, assessing steps, her eyes tracing every detail Rooker mentioned in his initial report. When she reached the living room, she paused. The body had been taken away, but the outline of where Dorian King had fallen remained, a stark reminder of how quickly power, wealth, and charisma could bleed into nothing. Holt had followed Dorian's empire for years, reading headlines that painted him as a Jamaican success story who built fortune out of grit and ambition. But standing inside his pristine home, she felt the familiar pull of contradiction. Men like Dorian rarely lived the way their public smiles promised. She examined the framed photographs lining the glass shelves, Dorian shaking hands with governors, celebrities, and global CEOs. Yet not a single family picture decorated the mansion's interior. No wife, no children, no warmth, just polished achievements and immaculate wealth. As Holt studied the images, Rooker briefed her on Aaliyah's fragile state and her cryptic claim that someone he knew had entered the mansion. Holt's attention sharpened. If the girl was telling the truth, the timeline shifted. This wasn't a random attack, this was personal. To understand the present, Holt knew she needed to understand the man behind the empire. Hours later, she sat in her unmarked car outside King Global Holdings, a sleek tower in downtown Miami with mirrored windows that hid more than they reflected. Inside, the staff moved with a kind of choreographed precision, polished, loyal, and careful. The receptionist recognized Dorian's name before Holt finished speaking. Her face tightened, grief mixing with fear. "Mrs. King is expecting you," she said softly. The elevator climb felt impossibly long. When the doors opened, Holt stepped into an office that radiated quiet authority. Floor-to-ceiling windows washed the room in blue daylight, illuminating a woman standing perfectly still beside Dorian's empty desk. Marcia King, tall, elegant, and composed, too composed for a woman who had just lost her husband. Their greeting was formal, almost brittle. Marcia offered condolences to whoever had to witness the scene, though her tone suggested distance rather than sorrow. Holt watched her carefully. "When was the last time you spoke to your husband?" she asked. Marcia's eyes flickered only for a second. "3 days ago. Our marriage, it hasn't functioned in years, but Dorian and I remained cordial." Cordial. Holt let the word settle. In her experience, people used that term when the truth was sharp enough to draw blood. Marcia walked around the desk, fingertips grazing its polished surface. "Dorian lived 2 lives," she said quietly. "The man the world knew and the man who came home." Her voice faltered not from grief but memory. "He carried charm like a weapon, detective, and secrets like currency." Holt leaned in. "Secrets like what?" Marcia hesitated before answering. "Affairs, long list of them. Women he collected the way other men collected cars. I stopped keeping track." She laughed once, bitter, restrained. Behind that golden smile was a man who never stopped wanting more. The revelation fit too neatly with Aaliyah's presence at the mansion, but Holt sensed there was more, something Marcia wasn't saying. Before Holt could press further, Marcia added, "If you want the truth about Dorian, talk to the people he loved outside of this building. They knew him better than I ever did." As Holt left the office, the elevator doors closing between them, she felt the first real thread pull tight. The polished billionaire with the camera-ready smile had lived a life full of shadows, hidden desires, and fractured loyalties. And somewhere within those shadows was the person Aaliyah claimed entered the mansion. Holt started the engine, her gaze hardening. The next person she needed to talk to wasn't a wife, a business partner, or an employee. It was the girl who had spent Dorian's final hours by his side. Detective Serena Holt arrived at the station just as Aaliyah Torres was being escorted into interview room 2. The girl looked even smaller under the harsh fluorescent lights, hair disheveled, jaw trembling, arms wrapped protectively around herself as if she feared she might crumble without the support. Holt paused at the door, studying her through the glass. This wasn't the confident mistress of a billionaire. This was someone hiding from something bigger than guilt. Holt entered quietly, setting her folder on the metal table. Aaliyah didn't look up. Not until Holt pulled out the chair across from her did she finally raise her eyes, dark, wide, and haunted in a way Holt had seen only in victims who hadn't processed their trauma yet. "I'm Detective Holt," she said gently. "I'm here to understand what happened last night." Aaliyah swallowed hard. I told them I didn't kill him." Her voice wavered. "I didn't touch him, I couldn't." "I'm not accusing you," Holt replied, leaning forward. "But I need the truth. Start with how you know Dorian King." For a moment, Aaliyah hesitated, as though weighing whether the truth would save her or destroy her. Then in a breath, she began. "I met him 8 months ago at a charity event downtown. I was serving drinks. He told me I looked like someone who deserved more than tips." Her eyes glossed. "I didn't know who he was at first. He never led with his name, just his charm." Holt let the words sit. She had heard similar stories before from young women caught in the gravitational pull of powerful men, but Aaliyah's version carried something sharper, fear woven beneath admiration. "He wanted to take care of me," Aaliyah continued, voice thin. "Said he could help me get out of the mess I was in. I needed money and he had too much. At first it felt like he was saving me." Her lips trembled. "But then he stopped wanting to save me. He wanted to own me." Holt noted the shift, rescuer to jailer. "What kind of ownership?" she asked quietly. Aaliyah stared at her hands. "He kept me in apartments he paid for, tracked my phone, asked who I talked to, and when he was angry," she flinched, eyes darting to the corner of the room. "He could be cruel." Holt waited for her to elaborate, but Aaliyah didn't. Instead, she pressed her palm to her chest, calming her breathing. The detective softened her tone. "Last night, what time did you arrive at the mansion?" "Just before 9, Aaliyah whispered. "He invited me for dinner. He was different, nervous, like he expected someone to show up. He kept checking the windows. He kept asking if I had told anyone where I was going." She blinked rapidly. He wasn't smiling, not the way he usually does. "And did someone come to the house?" Holt asked. Aaliyah's expression tightened. She nodded slowly. "I heard the door, not the front door, the side entrance near the kitchen. He went to meet them. I stayed upstairs, but I heard voices." Her throat constricted. "They were arguing. He said something like, 'You weren't supposed to come here.' Then it got quiet." Holt felt a current of tension coil in her spine. "Aaliyah, who was he talking to?" Aaliyah's breath hitched and her eyes filled with panic. "I don't know," she whispered. "But he knew them. He wasn't afraid, not at first." "What happened next?" Holt pressed. "I heard something fall, then a thud. When I came downstairs, her face crumpled. He was on the floor, bleeding, and whoever was in the house, they were gone." Holt studied her carefully. Aaliyah wasn't lying, not about the fear, not about the chaos, but she was holding something back, something she feared more than being a suspect. "What aren't you telling me?" Holt asked softly. Aaliyah's eyes darted away, her body shrinking into itself. "If I tell you," she whispered, "they'll come for me too." Holt leaned back, heart tightening with the weight of her words. Whoever had entered that mansion wasn't just connected to Dorian, they were connected to Aaliyah's terror. And Holt knew the investigation was about to turn towards someone powerful enough to keep a girl like Aaliyah silent. Detective Serena Holt drove straight from the station to the gated community where Marcia King lived. An elegant, manicured enclave where silence was purchased as easily as bottled water. Aaliyah's trembling account echoed through Holt's mind. He knew them, he wasn't afraid at first. It narrowed the suspect pool, and Marcia sat at the center of it whether she realized it or not. A uniformed guard waved Holt through after a brief call upstairs. The King residence was smaller than the mansion, more modest, more lived in, but still carried an air of curated perfection. Marcia opened the door before Holt knocked, her posture straight, her expression shrouded in carefully maintained composure. "Detective," she greeted. "You're here about Dorian. May I come in?" Holt asked. Marcia stepped aside without hesitation, guiding her into a warm, lamplit living room filled with soft earth tones and framed art pieces. It was the opposite of Dorian's cold, pristine mansion. This home felt inhabited, human, touched by someone who cared about comfort, not display. Holt took in the details before facing Marcia. "Thank you for seeing me again. I know this isn't easy." "Nothing with Dorian was easy," Marcia replied, lowering herself onto a cream-colored sofa. "But avoiding the truth only makes things worse." She gestured toward a chair. "Ask whatever you need." Holt sat slowly, watching the subtle tremor in Marcia's fingers. "Grief or something more complicated? You said earlier that your marriage to Dorian hadn't functioned in years. Can you explain that?" A long, quiet breath left Marcia's chest. "Dorian and I married young. We were partners long before he became the man the world praised. Back then he was ambitious, driven, hungry, but also kind." She paused, eyes wandering to the fireplace. Success changed him. Or maybe it revealed what he had hidden all along. Holt waited as Marcia's mask shifted into something more vulnerable. "He loved attention," Marcia continued. "He loved being wanted. Women were drawn to him, his confidence, his charm, his money, and he never turned them away." Her jaw tightened slightly. "I confronted him the first few times. He promised to stop. He never did." Holt leaned forward. "Did you ever consider leaving?" Marcia let out a quiet laugh, soft, bitter. "Of course, but leaving Dorian King wasn't simple. Everything I had, my business, my reputation, my stability was tied to him, and he knew it." Her eyes glinted. "He weaponized that. Every time I tried to pull away, he offered something new, a property, a partnership, a promise." She shook her head. "He knew exactly how to make me stay." The detective observed the emotional fracture lines forming in Marcia's voice, not rage, not denial. Sadness layered over years of disappointment. "What about 3 nights ago?" Holt asked. "You told me that was the last time you spoke." Marcia nodded. "He called unexpectedly, said he was closing a deal, said he needed me to sign some documents the next morning, but he sounded off." Her brows furrowed. His voice kept drifting. "He sounded worried. I asked what was wrong, and he said I should have handled it months ago." When I pressed, he changed the subject. "Handled what?" Holt asked. Marcia spread her hands helplessly. "He never told me. That was our marriage, half-truths and unfinished conversations. If he was in trouble, he didn't trust me with it anymore." The vulnerability shifted again, replaced by a controlled, practiced calm. Holt recognized it instantly, a survivor's self-protection. "Did you know he had someone else at the house last night?" Holt asked gently. Marcia didn't flinch. "Detective, Dorian always had someone else." She said it without bitterness, only tired recognition. "If you're asking whether I was jealous, no, that part of us died long ago." Holt watched her closely. "But you still had something to lose." Marcia's eyes sharpened. "So did many people in Dorian's world." She leaned forward. "If you think I had something to do with his death, say it. I'm not afraid of the truth." Holt held her gaze. "I'm not accusing you. I'm trying to understand who he feared in his last hours." For a moment Marcia froze, then her voice dropped to a whisper. "If Dorian was afraid, then he finally crossed the wrong person." Holt felt a chill as Marcia continued. "And it wasn't me." The detective rose slowly. Marcia's composure cracked only once as Holt reached the door. "Detective," she called softly. "Whoever he let inside that house, he trusted them." Holt nodded, stepping into the sunlight. And for the first time she realized the killer wasn't in Dorian's circle by accident. They were part of his life long before the final night. Detectives Rosa Alvarez and Marcus Hale left the Kingsley mansion that morning with more questions than answers. The tension between Adrian and Victoria still lingered like smoke in the air, visible, choking, impossible to ignore. But as they reached the end of the long stone driveway, Rosa stopped walking. Something kept tugging at her mind, pulling her back into the timeline of the night Evelyn Kingsley died. 6 hours, Rosa murmured. Adrian mentioned he left the charity gala around 11. Victoria said she last saw him at midnight. That still leaves us nearly 6 hours before the house staff found Evelyn's body. Marcus raised a brow. 6 hours we know nothing about. Rosa nodded. 6 hours that Adrian Kingsley doesn't seem eager to explain. They returned to the precinct, where the murder board waited, Evelyn's photo at the center, the mansion blueprint to its right, and the gala guest list to the left. Marcus stared at the clock. "He's hiding something," he said. "Even if he didn't kill her, he's protecting someone." Rosa flipped through the initial witness statements. According to the valet logs, Adrian's car was checked out at 11:07 p.m., but the gate camera shows him leaving the estate again at 1:52 a.m. Marcus froze. "Wait, so he came back home then left again?" "Exactly," Rosa replied. "That's almost a 2-hour gap inside the house, and we don't know what he did during that time." Marcus leaned closer to the screen, "which means the murder could have happened while he was home or after he left again." Rosa exhaled slowly. That's why the timeline feels wrong. Everything about that night feels wrong. They traced Adrian's movements after he left the estate a second time. His phone signal pinged along the quieter outskirts of town, a stretch of empty roads leading toward the lakeside cabins. It was an area wealthy families often used for private getaways, affairs, or meetings they didn't want recorded in public logs. Marcus clicked his tongue. Classic rich guy secrecy route. Rosa pulled up traffic camera images, but the fog that night swallowed nearly everything. Only a blurred outline of Adrian's luxury SUV appeared on one camera near Ridgeview Lake at 2:13 a.m. Why go there in the middle of the night? Rosa asked. And alone, Marcus crossed his arms. Maybe he wasn't alone. Rosa remembered Adrian's carefully measured expression, the way he answered every question with the smoothness of a man trained to hide his emotions. He's covering for someone, she whispered again. They dug deeper, phone records, bank statements, security logs, but Adrian Kingsley was careful, painfully careful. Most of his digital footprint from that night was missing or wiped altogether. That kind of precision wasn't normal, it was deliberate. At 5:40 a.m., Adrian returned home. At 6:10 a.m., the housekeeper found Evelyn at the base of the grand staircase. Marcus sighed. Only we had eyes inside that house between midnight and sunrise. Rosa's gaze drifted to the mansion blueprint. Maybe we do. She stepped closer, pointing to a narrow corridor behind the main staircase, a service hallway used by staff. The old estates installed tiny surveillance points years ago, not full cameras but small lenses for monitoring staff movement. Most owners never bothered disabling them. Marcus stared at her. You're thinking one of those lenses might have captured something. Rosa nodded. If the Kinsleys never removed them, we might find fragments of footage, maybe blurred, maybe partial, but something. Marcus grabbed his coat. Then we need a warrant. Rosa didn't move. A chill crawled down her spine as she imagined what could be waiting in that dark hallway. Marcus, she said quietly, if those cameras caught what I think they did, then the truth about those missing hours might destroy more than just Adrian Kingsley's reputation. He paused, listening. It might destroy someone else entirely. And with that realization hanging between them, they turned back toward the mansion, toward secrets buried in the shadows of the Kingsley estate, and toward the person who didn't want those missing hours found. The Kingsley mansion felt different when detectives Rosa Alvarez and Marcus Hale returned that afternoon, heavier, quieter, as if the house itself recoiled from their presence. Rosa sensed it immediately. The silence was thick, suffocating, almost watchful. Someone inside this home didn't want the past 6 hours uncovered. Victoria Kingsley met them at the door, her expression tight and her voice clipped. Back again, I thought the interview this morning was sufficient. Marcus offered a polite but firm nod. We need access to some of the older staff corridors, it's routine. Victoria's brows twitched barely, but enough. Those areas haven't been used in years. Which means no one has tampered with anything, Rosa replied, stepping forward. It's exactly what we hope. Victoria hesitated, her fingers curling against her silk blouse as if gripping an invisible thread. But before she could object, Adrian appeared at the top of the staircase, his presence as commanding as ever. Let them in, he said. Victoria's eyes sharpened, but she obeyed, turning away without a word. As Adrian descended, Rosa noticed something new, an exhaustion behind his polished demeanor, a tightness around the mouth that hadn't been there earlier. He was unraveling. Not visibly, not loudly, but quietly beneath the surface. Detectives, he said, clearing his throat. I'd prefer to be present while you search. Marcus shrugged. You can observe, but you don't interfere. Adrian's smile was golden, controlled, and hollow. Of course. They moved into the main hall. Rosa gestured to the narrow door hidden behind the base of the staircase. It blended into the wall so seamlessly most guests would never notice it. This corridor, she said, leads to the old servant passages. Adrian folded his arms. We haven't used those in decades. Exactly, Rosa replied. The door creaked open, releasing a breath of stale, cool air. Dust curled in the sunlight as Marcus stepped inside. The corridor was narrow, the ceiling low, the wallpaper peeling in long, tired strips. Rosa felt the temperature change instantly. It was colder here, untouched, forgotten, perfect for secrets. Marcus scanned the walls. The valence lenses should be about eye level, small, usually brass-rimmed. Rosa found the first one a few steps in, a tiny black circle embedded into the wall, no bigger than the head of a nail. Here, Marcus exhaled, old but intact. Rosa photographed the lens. If the recordings still exist, they'll be stored somewhere in the estate, likely in an old security panel. Adrian shifted behind them. If such a panel exists, I wouldn't know. But his voice faltered. Rosa noticed. You know more about this house than anyone, she said softly. Your father designed its security systems. If there's footage, you'd know where it is. Adrian's jaw tightened, but he didn't answer. They continued deeper. A second lens, then a third, all intact, all aimed toward the main staircase, the corridor intersection, and the side entrance where someone could slip in or out unseen. As they reached the end of the passage, Marcus paused. Rosa, look at this. Embedded near the final lens was something unusual, a faint smear barely visible until the flashlight struck it. A dried, reddish-brown streak. Rosa crouched. Blood. Adrian flinched. Rosa stood slowly, turning toward him. This hallway connects directly to the staircase where Evelyn was found. Whoever moved through here that night didn't come out clean. Adrian swallowed, the facade cracking for a second. Detective, but then a voice cut through the air. Adrian. It was Charlotte, Victoria's younger sister. She emerged from the shadows of the adjacent hallway, her eyes wide, her voice trembling. She wasn't dressed like someone casually walking the house. She looked shaken, almost hunted. I need to tell you something, she whispered, not to Rosa, not to Marcus, to Adrian. Rosa exchanged a sharp glance with Marcus. Charlotte's timing was not a coincidence. What is it, Charlotte? Adrian asked, his voice suddenly stripped of confidence. She looked at the detectives, then back at Adrian, her eyes glassy with a secret she'd been holding for too long. It's about Evelyn, she whispered, and what she found out the night before she died. Rosa felt the temperature shift again. Whatever Charlotte was about to reveal was the first crack in the Kingsley family's perfect mask, and it was going to shatter everything. Charlotte stood frozen in the dim hallway, her breath shallow, her fingers twisting nervously at the hem of her sweater. Rosa watched her closely. This wasn't someone looking for attention. This was someone drowning in fear. Charlotte, Adrian murmured, stepping closer. Whatever you think you know, I do know, she whispered. And I should have said something sooner. Rosa gestured gently. Let's move somewhere private. They guided her into a quiet study off the corridor, the blinds drawn, the air stale with old books and colder secrets. Charlotte sat on the edge of a leather chair, shoulders trembling. Adrian hovered beside her, his protectiveness both suspicious and telling. Marcus set his recorder on the table. Start from the beginning. What did Evelyn find out? Charlotte closed her eyes, gathering courage. She discovered that Adrian wasn't just helping me with money. Her voice cracked. He was helping me because I was being blackmailed. Rosa leaned forward. By whom? Charlotte's gaze darted to the door, then to Adrian. A man I used to date. A mistake. Someone who didn't take rejection well. Her hands shook. He told me he had photos, personal ones. He threatened to leak them, send them to my family, my job, everywhere. Marcus's brow tightened, and Adrian stepped in. Charlotte nodded slowly. He paid the man off quietly, but the guy kept coming back, demanding more. Her breath hitched. Adrian didn't want Victoria to know, not because of the money, but because it would open old wounds in their marriage. Rosa glanced at Adrian. So Evelyn learned you were funneling money to keep this man silent. Adrian exhaled shakily. I wasn't having an affair. I wasn't hiding another woman. I was protecting Charlotte. His voice was softer now, stripped of arrogance. Evelyn saw one of the payments in the ledger. She assumed the worst. Charlotte wiped her eyes. She confronted me first. I panicked. I begged her not to tell Victoria. I told her everything. Evelyn said she'd help, that she'd talk to Adrian, try to get ahead of it before the press or anyone else found out. Marcus tapped the table lightly. But that conversation never happened, did it? Charlotte's expression darkened. No, she disappeared that night. I thought maybe she changed her mind. Rosa's mind raced. Secrets, leverage, threats. Evelyn had stepped into a storm she didn't understand. Marcus asked, did the blackmailer know Evelyn was aware of the payments? Charlotte hesitated. I don't know, but he's erratic, dangerous. If he thought she would expose him. Rosa exchanged a troubled glance with Marcus. This man, what's his name? Charlotte swallowed. Darren Cole. The shift in the room was immediate. Rosa straightened. Darren Cole has priors, assault, harassment, extortion. If he found his way onto this property. Adrian stepped forward, his composure cracking fully for the first time. So you think this man, this parasite, could have been here that night? In my home. Rosa didn't answer. She didn't need to. Instead, she asked Charlotte, do you still have any messages from him, threats, anything recent? Charlotte nodded shakily. Yes, last week he sent me a photo of myself leaving this mansion. He said, nice place, shame if people found out why you're really there. Marcus cursed under his breath. He was close enough to take pictures. That puts him physically near the estate. Adrian's face drained of color. Rosa stood, determination hardening in her voice. We need Darren Cole's address and we need to find him before he disappears. Charlotte looked between them, terrified. Detective, if he did this, he won't stop. He thinks he owns me. Rosa placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Not anymore. But as they prepared to leave, Charlotte added something that made Rosa pause. Evelyn said she found something else, she whispered. Something she didn't tell me, something bigger. Rosa froze. Bigger than blackmail? Charlotte nodded. She said the night before she died, she uncovered the real reason Adrian was afraid. The words hung in the air like a blade. Rosa felt Charlotte's final sentence settle over the room like cold ash. The real reason Adrian was afraid, it wasn't the blackmailer, it wasn't the money. Something darker threaded beneath his polished facade, something Evelyn had uncovered only hours before her death. Rosa straightened, her voice steady. We need to move quickly. The longer Darren Cole is unaccounted for, the more dangerous this becomes. Adrian stepped forward, his expression haunted. If he hurt Evelyn, if he stepped into my home. Rosa cut him off gently. We don't know what he did yet, but we do know he had motives, access and nerve. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced down. The team pulled Darren's last known address. It's a rundown apartment 40 minutes from here. Rosa nodded. We'll leave immediately. But before they could walk out, Charlotte grabbed Rosa's wrist. Her fingers were ice cold. Detective, what if it wasn't just him? Rosa paused. What do you mean? Charlotte's voice dropped, her trembling whisper. Evelyn told me money changes people, especially people who feel owed. She swallowed. She said someone in this house was on a peril they shouldn't have been, someone who knew too much and threatened to expose it. Adrian's head whipped toward her. Who in this house would dare? Charlotte shut her eyes. She didn't say, only that she had proof. Rosa exchanged another look with Marcus. It wasn't just external threats now. Something internal had been festering, someone close enough to walk the mansion unseen, someone whose silence had been bought and who might have turned. They arrived at Darren Cole's apartment building just after dusk. The place reeked of moulid and neglect, the hallway buzzing with flickering lights. A TV blared somewhere behind thin walls. Rosa felt the tension coil in her spine. Marcus knocked hard. Darren Cole, police, no response. He knocked again, still nothing. Rosa motioned to the superintendent waiting at the stairwell. Open it. The super slid the key in with shaking hands. Darren had that effect on people. The door creaked open. Inside, the apartment was dim, chaotic, clothes tossed everywhere, dishes stacked, a mattress on the floor. But what caught Rosa's eye wasn't the mess, it was the wall. A pinboard hung there covered in photos, not of Charlotte, not of Darren's past victims, photos of the Kingsley mansion, Charlotte entering the gate, Adrian standing on the balcony, Evelyn leaving the house the morning before she died, and one photo that made Rosa's breath stop, a blurry shot of someone entering the side door the night of Evelyn's murder. The timestamp matched the window of the missing hours. Rosa stared at the figure, dark clothing, hood up, tall. But the way the person held their shoulders, the slight forward tilt, Marcus whispered, "That's not Darren." Rosa nodded. "No, Darren's shorter, stockier. This person is leaner, more controlled." Marcus scanned the room. Darren's been watching, but someone else has been acting. Rosa moved to the cluttered table. A pile of envelopes lay scattered, some opened, some sealed. Inside the open ones were deposit slips, large ones, repeated payments. Rosa flipped one over. "These accounts aren't Adrian's." She lifted another slip, then another. These came from a private holding, someone with access to old family funds. Marcus leaned over her shoulder. So someone else was paying Darren to stay quiet. Rosa felt the pieces shift. Not Adrian, someone afraid Evelyn knew too much, someone who benefited from her silence. A sudden thud came from the back room. Marcus drew his weapon. "Police!" They pushed into the bedroom, only to find the window open, curtains fluttering violently. The fire escape rattled. Someone had just left. Rosa leaned out, scanning the alley. Only the fading echo of footsteps remained. "He was here," she whispered. "He heard us, he ran." Marcus holstered his weapon. "Darren didn't bolt like that for nothing. Whoever was paying him, that's who he's afraid of." Rosa stared again at the photo on the wall, the unknown figure entering the mansion. "Someone inside the Kingsley home," she said softly. "Someone Evelyn confronted." She turned to Marcus, her voice sharpening with certainty. "We need to go back to the mansion, because whatever Evelyn found, the killer is still there." And the silence inside those walls was hiding more secrets than ever. The Kingsley mansion loomed in the night air as Rosa and Marcus returned, the wind brushing across the estate like a warning. Rosa felt it, a shift, a pressure, as if the house itself waited for them to uncover what it had watched in silence. Inside, Victoria stood at the base of the grand staircase, arms crossed, her expression tight, almost brittle. "Back again," she said coolly. "Is this going to be a nightly routine, Detective Alvarez?" Rosa didn't flinch. "We found new evidence. We need access to Evelyn's room." For a moment, Victoria's composure cracked. A flicker, fear, annoyance, crossed her face before she smoothed it away. "Her room was cleared. I told your officers earlier." "You cleared it," Marcus corrected gently. "Not us." Victoria stiffened. "I removed only personal things, nothing related to your investigation." Rosa stepped closer. "We need to verify that." Victoria hesitated just long enough for Rosa to confirm she was hiding something, but before Victoria could respond, Adrian emerged from the hallway, his voice weary. "Let them. We have nothing left to hide." Victoria shot him a deadly look but stepped aside. Evelyn's room was meticulously neat, almost unnaturally polished for someone who had lived in it just days before her death. Fresh linens, organized shelves, everything in perfect order, but Rosa knew order could be a disguise. Marcus began checking the drawers. Rosa moved to Evelyn's bedside table. Only one item remained inside, her phone charger. The phone itself was missing. Victoria said she took personal belongings, Marcus said. Did she mean the phone? Rosa shook her head. Victoria wouldn't hide the phone. She barely wanted Evelyn in this house. Then who took it? Before Rosa could answer, Adrian appeared at the doorway, his shoulders slumped. "I have Evelyn's phone." Rosa's pulse quickened. "Why didn't you tell us earlier?" He hesitated. "Because I didn't know if what's on it would make things worse." Rosa stepped forward. "Show me." Adrian nodded and disappeared down the hallway. He returned a minute later holding the phone, black, cracked at the corner, a faint smear of dried makeup on the screen. He handed it to Rosa. "She left it in my study the night she died. I thought she forgot it." Rosa powered it on. It buzzed weakly, the battery nearly dead. Several notifications flashed across the screen, missed calls, unread texts, and one voicemail from an unknown number. Timestamp 1:23 a.m., just 15 minutes before Evelyn's estimated time of death. Rosa tapped play, at first only static. Then Evelyn's voice burst through, shaking, breathless, terrified. "Adrian, please, you were right. Someone's watching the house. I saw them near the side door. I think they followed me earlier. I can't." A sharp gasp. "If anything happens to me, you need to know the money wasn't the secret. It's deeper. Someone in this house, someone close to you." A loud crash cut her off. A muffled scream, then footsteps, fast pounding. Evelyn's final words were barely audible beneath the chaos. "Don't trust." The message ended abruptly. The room froze. Adrian's face drained of all color. She called me that night." Rosa lowered the phone slowly. Someone deleted the rest of her voicemails, but they missed this one. Marcus exhaled. She knew someone inside the mansion was involved, someone she trusted enough to confront. Rosa looked up sharply. "Who had access to your study the night Evelyn left the phone there?" Adrian swallowed hard. Anyone in the family and the staff. Who specifically? Rosa pressed. His answer came out in a whisper. Victoria, Charlotte, the housekeeper, Mara, and he hesitated. And who? Rosa demanded. Adrian met her eyes. My brother. The silence that followed was suffocating. You never mentioned you had a brother, Rosa said slowly. Adrian looked away, guilt tightening his features. I didn't think it mattered. Rosa's voice hardened. It matters now. Because Evelyn didn't just die with secrets. She died trying to expose the one person Adrian never expected to betray him. Detective Rosa Alvarez stood outside the Kingsley Mansion's newly renovated wing, her eyes fixed on the wall of glass that gleamed under the mid-afternoon sun. It was a room Adrian had commissioned years ago, a space that allowed him to survey the entire property while remaining hidden. The irony was thick. He could watch everyone, yet he hadn't seen what had happened to Evelyn until it was too late. Marcus Hale trailed behind, checking his notes. This wing, hardly anyone enters it. Mostly Adrian uses it for meetings and private calls. Security footage confirms that. Rosa's gaze shifted, which means whoever had access last night had to be someone he trusted implicitly or someone with keys, codes, or inside knowledge. Adrian appeared at the doorway, looking unsettled. For the first time, the polished billionaire persona had slipped, revealing a thin layer of raw anxiety. I swear, he said, voice low, no one else should have been there. He stopped, as if remembering something. Except Charlotte. She's been coming in and out to help me sort files for months. She knows the codes. Rosa noted the hesitation. And Victoria, she doesn't care about this room, Adrian replied quickly. She never enters it. Marcus raised an eyebrow. Yet Charlotte admitted to being here the night before Evelyn died, right? Adrian hesitated. She said she was organizing paperwork. I didn't think anything of it. Rosa's instinct screamed at her. There was more than paperwork going on behind those glass walls that night. She motioned for Adrian to lead the way inside. The glass room was pristine marble floors, minimalist furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the afternoon sun like a mirror. It was beautiful, clinical, and cold. Rosa could feel the tension in the air, like it had been waiting for her to uncover the secrets it had witnessed. She walked slowly, eyes scanning every surface. On a long steel desk lay scattered papers, financial records, phone bills, and envelopes, some sealed, some open. A few held what appeared to be photographs of Evelyn. She picked one up carefully, Evelyn standing in the foyer, looking at someone off camera. Edge of the photograph was smeared with a faint trace of something dark. Blood, ink, hard to tell. Marcus leaned down near the desk. Looks like someone tried to remove evidence. Rosa noticed the fingerprints in the dust on the glass wall behind the desk, smudged, hurried, careful. Someone had been trying to erase their presence. Then she heard it, a soft click from the corner of the room. She froze. Marcus tensed. Adrian's eyes widened. A sliding glass panel opened slowly, and there she was, Charlotte. The woman in the glass room. Her face was pale, eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. She held a manila envelope clutched to her chest like a shield. Detectives, her voice broke, faltering as though the walls themselves were listening. I didn't mean for it to happen. Rosa's pulse quickened. Charlotte, calm down. What are you talking about? She swallowed, shaking. Evelyn found out about the money, the payments, but also about the insider. About someone in the house who was using our trust to cover something much worse. She confronted them in this room. I wasn't there at first, but when I got here, her voice trembled. They panicked. Adrian stepped forward. Who? Charlotte, who was in this room? She shook her head violently. I can't, not yet, but I have this. She thrust the envelope toward Rosa. It's everything Evelyn kept, records, photos, voicemails, proof of who moved behind our backs. Rosa took it carefully, feeling the weight of truth settle like a stone in her chest. This room had witnessed the confrontation. It had been the last place Evelyn had stood alive, and now it held the answers they had been chasing for weeks. Marcus glanced at Adrian. Looks like the glass doesn't hide everything. Adrian's jaw tightened, realization and fear crossing his face. If Evelyn documented it all, then she knew exactly who she couldn't trust. Rosa looked at Charlotte, steadying. Then it's time we find out, and the woman in the glass room knows exactly where to start. The envelope thumped heavily against Rosa's hand, carrying the weight of the final secrets. Detective Rosa Alvarez and Marcus Hale spent the rest of the evening sifting through the envelope Charlotte had delivered in the glass room. The contents were staggering: photographs, handwritten notes, receipts, phone records, and digital files stored on a small encrypted drive. Each piece painted a darker picture than the one before, revealing layers of deception no one outside the Kingsley mansion could have imagined. Rosa studied the first set of photographs carefully. Each image captured Evelyn moving through the house, checking doors, glancing nervously over her shoulder, whispering to someone whose face was never shown. One photo, taken from the kitchen corridor, showed a blurred figure in the doorway. Their posture was casual but precise, like someone who had been in that house countless times before. Not a visitor, not a delivery person, someone who belonged. Marcus flipped through the notes Charlotte had found, most written in Evelyn's familiar handwriting. Payments, he muttered, pointing to a page covered in numbers and annotations. Someone was buying silence, not just Darren Cole. Multiple accounts, multiple amounts, and not from Adrian, from the estate itself. Rosa's fingers traced the entries. Someone in this family or someone with access to the estate's accounts was funneling money to keep secrets quiet, but who? Her voice faltered slightly as she realized the implications. Evelyn documented everything, yet she was still vulnerable. Charlotte spoke quietly from the side, her voice barely above a whisper. She said if the wrong person discovered that she had proof, they'd come after her. She looked down at her hands, and they did. Rosa nodded. Exactly, we're seeing evidence of premeditation. Whoever killed her knew she had this envelope, or at least suspected she had proof, and they didn't want it leaving the mansion. The encrypted drive held digital records, email correspondence, scanned invoices, and surveillance logs from the house. Marcus plugged it into his laptop and began decoding the files. One video clip, timestamped the night before Evelyn's death, made Rosa stiffen. It was captured from the small lens inside the glass room itself. Evelyn had been recording without knowing. In the footage, a shadowed figure entered quietly, moving toward the study. Evelyn looked up, startled. The figure froze, then raised a hand, not threatening, just a pause that suggested familiarity. She knew this person, Marcus said, his voice low. Look at the body language. She isn't afraid at first. She steps forward, then something changes. Rosa leaned closer, her stomach tightening. The figure's face was just visible, enough to recognize the contours of someone close, not a stranger, not Darren Cole, someone from the house itself. Cross-reference this with the fingerprints on the glass room lenses, Rosa murmured. The timeline from the voicemails, the financial records. Whoever did this left evidence, but only Evelyn documented it. Charlotte shivered. She warned me. She said I had to be careful, that the person in the house wouldn't stop at threats. Rosa felt the weight of the truth pressing down. Evelyn hadn't just uncovered a blackmailer. She had discovered someone exploiting their proximity for power and greed, someone who could manipulate, control, and kill if necessary. The envelope Charlotte held was more than evidence. It was a roadmap to the killer. Marcus paused at another file. Look at this. Emails between Adrian and someone named CM. These aren't just business notes. They reference controlling payments, hush money, and ensuring compliance. The tone is commanding, threatening. Rosa frowned. CM, Charlotte Morrison. She glanced at Charlotte, whose face had gone pale. Charlotte's voice cracked. Yes, I had access, but I swear I never. Rosa held up a hand. We're not accusing anyone yet, but it confirms what Evelyn suspected. The killer had both access and motive, and money alone wasn't enough to guarantee loyalty. Secrets can't always be bought, Marcus exhaled. The house, the money, the cameras, they thought they controlled everything, but Evelyn documented the truth. That's why they had to silence her. Rosa looked at Charlotte and Adrian, then at the photographs and digital files spread across the desk. The mansion, pristine and polished to outsiders, had been a cage, and the police had just unlocked the first door. Rosa's gaze hardened. This changes everything. Whoever orchestrated Evelyn's death was not an outsider. They were close, they were trusted, and they are still in this house or somewhere they think we won't look. Adrian swallowed hard, the weight of suspicion pressing down on him. Charlotte shivered, clutching the envelope as though it were the last link to a person she had lost. And now, Rosa said quietly, her voice carrying steel beneath the calm, we follow the trail Evelyn left. Every account, every shadow, every whisper she documented. Because the person responsible is counting on us giving up before we reach them. Outside, the wind rattled the mansion windows. Inside, the envelope lay open on the desk, and the storm that Evelyn had tried to reveal was only just beginning. The Kingsley mansion was silent that night, but the tension inside was suffocating. Detective Rosa Alvarez moved quietly down the polished marble hallway, Marcus Hale at her side, Charlotte clutching Evelyn's envelope like a talisman. The storm outside rattled the large bay windows, wind howling as if echoing the chaos within. Tonight, secrets would be forced into the open and no one could escape the truth. Rosa stopped at the door to the glass room. The reflections of the interior lights shimmered across the glass, creating fragmented shadows. She glanced at Charlotte. This is it. This is where everything began and where it ends. Charlotte nodded, pale but resolute. Evelyn recorded everything here, whoever did this. They'll be revealed tonight. Adrian King lingered behind them, his face a mask of controlled anxiety. You're sure about this? He asked. It's my family. If the truth comes out, Rosa's voice was firm. The truth doesn't belong to you, Adrian. It belongs to Evelyn and to justice. They entered the glass room cautiously. The cold marble floor reflected their movements, the walls adorned with evidence, photographs, letters, and scattered papers from the envelope. Every object told a fragment of the story. Rosa could feel the weight of the final hours pressing down on her. Marcus motioned toward the far corner. The surveillance lenses still operate. I've reactivated them. If the killer is here, we'll see them. They waited in silence, the faint hum of electronics the only sound. Minutes passed, then a subtle movement, shadows shifting behind the partially drawn curtains. Stop, Rosa commanded sharply. Show yourself. A figure emerged, Victoria the matriarch, her face pale and controlled. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of fear that betrayed her calm. She stepped toward them slowly. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she said, voice trembling. Evelyn, she found out about everything. She confronted me. Rosa's eyes narrowed. About the payments, about the blackmail. Victoria shook her head. No, worse. She found out about my brother, Damien. He's the one who orchestrated the threats, the payments, the intimidation. I thought I could protect the family by keeping it quiet, but I underestimated him. And Evelyn, her voice broke. She wouldn't stop. Marcus stepped forward. So it was Damien in the glass room that night. Victoria nodded, tears streaming. He panicked when she accused him. I tried to stop him, but he couldn't control himself, and then she was gone. Rosa's pulse quickened. Where is he now? Victoria swallowed. I don't know, he's smart. He knows the house, the cameras, the blind spots. He could be anywhere. Charlotte's hands shook as she held the envelope. The recordings, they have him. He was captured on Evelyn's phone before she died. We can show the police exactly what he did. Rosa nodded. Good, but first we need him here. If he thinks he's safe in the shadows, he's wrong. Just then, a soft click echoed behind them. The glass door slid open, revealing Damien King. His tall frame cast a menacing shadow across the marble floor. He smiled coldly, the glint of malice in his eyes unmistakable. Detectives, he said smoothly, I suppose this is my family reunion. Rosa stepped forward, hand on her weapon. Damien King, you're under arrest for the murder of Evelyn Kingsley and multiple counts of intimidation and extortion. He laughed softly, circling them like a predator. You think money buys loyalty? You think secrets can be contained forever? Evelyn found out the truth, and now so have you. Marcus kept his weapon trained on him. Drop the act, there's no escape. Damien's smirk faltered. He looked at the scattered evidence, the photographs, the envelopes, the videos. You have no idea what you're holding, he whispered almost admiringly. But yes, you've cornered me. Rosa's voice hardened. It ends tonight. No more lies, no more threats, no more death. For a tense moment, Damien hesitated, calculating. Then almost reluctantly, he raised his hands. The storm outside raged, but inside the house seemed to exhale. Charlotte stepped forward, trembling. Evelyn, justice will come for you. Rosa nodded, feeling the weight lift slightly. The envelope, the recordings, the evidence, all of it had led to this moment. Evelyn's voice, once silenced, had guided them to the truth. Damien was taken into custody, his carefully constructed world crumbling with every step down the grand staircase. Victoria collapsed into a chair, sobbing, while Adrian buried his face in his hands. Marcus kept watch while Rosa looked around the glass room, imagining Evelyn standing there fearless, determined to expose what others wanted hidden. This house has seen enough secrets for a lifetime, Rosa whispered. But tonight, the truth won. Outside, the storm began to subside. Inside, the mansion remained silent, finally. The darkness had ended and justice at last had been delivered.